I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Art, the podcast where we get to know the women behind their art.
If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll show you what I mean. If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll bring you to your knees. If you follow me.
My guest this week is Zoey Frank, a Colorado-based painter who works one large multiple-figure compositions and still lifes in oil, and a new mother. She received her MFA in painting from Laguna College of Art and Design in California after studying for 4 years with Juliet Aristides at Gage Academy of Art in Seattle, Washington. Zoey has received 3 Elizabeth Greenshields grants. Her work has been featured in publications such as Fine Art Connoisseur and American Art Collector, and she's exhibited in galleries across the United States, England, and the Netherlands. Zoey was born in Boulder, Colorado in 1987, the only child of Ina Robbins, a psychotherapist, and Douglas Frank, an acupuncturist. As a child, Zoey was drawn to arts and crafts. In school, she also enjoyed sports and briefly aspired to become a basketball player. But from the age of 13, she knew that art would be her life calling, and she chose colleges that would give her the foundation for her career. Whilst in school, she was already selling her paintings, so she was encouraged that once she graduated, she could make a living with her art. She also earned some extra cash sitting for figurative artists. For a while, Zoey struggled with health issues, which eventually served to confirm her life's purpose. As her success has grown, so too have her canvases, and she is currently working on an 18 feet high by 20 feet wide piece that she began 2 years ago. Zoey also offers online courses on a variety of subjects. She and her husband, German professor Peter Erickson, and daughter Ida Joan live in Fort Collins, Colorado. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, really happy to be here.
And I had to remember to put a Y on the end of your name, Zoey, with a Y. I'm curious from what you said about your name, do you have any nicknames?
Just from my parents, I guess, and some friends. But no, I go by Zoey.
Are you going to share that with us?
My parents call me Zizi.
Well, first of all, we have to tell everybody, because I know you have a lot of followers on social media, but do they know about your 7-month-old daughter?
I haven't made a big announcement on it on social media, so I suppose many people don't. But she's starting to appear in some of my paintings, and I was teaching a class with an online course with 300 students, and I was very pregnant during the course, and so it was announced just to some of the folks who are, kind of following me that way. But yeah, it's been just amazing.
Yeah, and she has a pretty name.
Her name's Ida Joan. Ida. It's been so amazing to have her in our lives. Wanted this for a really long time, and actually had to do IVF to get here. So it was a long process, and I've just been kind of relishing all these moments with her now.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's quite a journey that you've had. And I can imagine with you working at home, it's actually quite convenient with having a toddler, because you can, go back and forth, right? Can you, from the studio? And
no, I actually rent a studio outside of the house, which is also convenient. I think it's actually been helpful to have that. I don't know. I think it can work both ways. I think it can be very convenient to do that for people, but also maybe harder to separate and actually get work done. I took a maternity leave for 3 months, and then I've been kind of gradually getting back to a full-time schedule and going to work for the day.
Well, that's a hard part of being a parent, isn't it? The separation.
Yeah, it's been a good balance. I think when I was in the middle of maternity leave, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I never want to go back to work. This is just so wonderful. And then maybe 2 weeks before the end, I was really excited to start painting again and feeling kind of ready for the next phase. And we actually have an au pair at home. And so she brings Ida to the studio once a day for us to have a feeding, and I get to, get some little snuggles in. And so it's felt like a pretty good balance, getting to spend time with her and and then getting back to these big projects in the studio that I'm so excited about.
Well, tell us about those.
Oh, I'm I'm working on a ridiculously large painting, which is going to be 18 feet high by 20 feet wide, which is just a little absurd. But I'm working on it. So it's on 5 different panels, and I can't actually fit the height of it in my studio. My studio is only 10 feet high. So it's kind of divided in half, and I have half the painting on one side of my studio and the other half on the other. And I'm like trying to develop kind of bring up each panel and get the whole painting working as much as I can before hopefully being able to put it together somewhere with like a cherry picker or a scissor lift or whatever, to like work on the thing all together at some point. But I started it 2 years ago, and then now I'm just like the last couple of months I've been really diving back in after taking a break for about a year on this larger painting. I was working on kind of smaller projects through the pregnancy and the early months of Ida's life. Yeah.
So is this a commission, Zoey?
It's not. It is just a bit of a folly. It's just a giant project that I wanted to try. So we'll see where it ends up. Yeah.
And you said that your Ida has actually started to come into the studio, but does that mean you're tempted to paint her and you're going to become a portrait artist just because of your daughter?
Not doing portraits. I've been inserting her into kind of multiple figure scenes. So she's actually, I think I've done 3 paintings that she appears in, but she's a tiny little baby head in the middle of a big kind of group scene so far.
So going back to this very large piece, do you prefer to work on very large format? Is that your preferred size?
I do really like working large. I think this might be the largest painting that I make. This is a little absurd. And it's really challenging to not be able to see the whole painting altogether in the studio. So I feel like I'm sometimes making value and color shifts in one part and then realizing that maybe they don't actually, like, they work on that panel, but then they don't actually support the rest of the painting. So I feel like I'm making this harder for myself than it needs to be. But I do love working kind of on life-size figures. I'm not sure what I think about this larger-than-life scale. It's been really fun. And I'm I guess maybe I do love it. I'm like so excited about this painting, and I'm like really enjoying getting back into it after taking a break from it. So maybe I do like it, but this is a little crazy. I think going back to more like the, 8 by 12 foot paintings might be kind of where I go after this one.
How did you choose that size then? Why did you want to go so big?
There was a possible commission that I was talking about with the gallery. And so I got excited about the idea of being able to make a painting this large. So there was the building that was looking for a painting this size. And I just kind of decided that I just wanted to do it. Like once I started kind of thinking through the commission and like once the idea was kind of open to me, I was kind of just decided I wanted to do it one way or the other. And they haven't ended up actually buying a painting at all yet to fill the space. So it's not a closed thing that it won't happen. But in any case, I just got really excited about these paintings. I was also at the Julie Meritou exhibition at the Whitney a couple of years ago and was just really loving the scale of her work and inspired by these kind of monumental scope of her paintings, and just feeling like it was so inspiring to see particularly a woman just taking up so much space and just filling this museum with these giant paintings. And I don't know, just that just felt really moving to me, that they function really differently because of how big they are. You're kind of walking into this whole world and looking through the whole, kind of looking around the painting, enveloped by it, and then also able to kind of step back and see the full composition, and just the way that I kind of felt like I was interacting with them in this more kind of bodily, kind of, I don't know, tactile, experiential kind of mode felt really exciting to me.
Well, they certainly are ambitious, and there's a lot of detail in your work too, isn't there? If that's what your art looked like when you graduated from art school.
Yeah, it's kind of with this giant one. I've been looking at some images of Indian miniatures and the like patterns that you see in the kind of flattened space that happens in those paintings. And so I'm working on this absolutely giant scale, but I'm also looking at the kind of some of the approaches from Indian miniatures right now as I'm trying to move the painting forward, which is funny to think about. No, my paintings certainly didn't look like this right when I got out of art school. It's been an evolution of the work over the last, I guess a little bit more than a decade or so. Yeah, it keeps shifting. I feel like I'm kind of on a little trajectory of investigation where one painting is leading towards the next, and I keep kind of having things that work in the previous paintings, and then parts that don't work, and I want to kind of try things out in a slightly different way with each new painting. So each one is a little bit different in its approach.
And if you would look at what you did then, after art school, how would you describe that? And how would you describe your art now how has it evolved and changed in your personality and the personality of your art?
Yeah. My initial art training was an atelier approach. And so I spent 4 years really learning kind of traditional painting skills. I spent a year drawing and then just painting in black and white. And then in year 3, we finally moved into color, and we were working from live models every day and just learning how to draw and paint really, really accurately. But kind of in this, like with this very set approach, and a set kind of approach to color, and wasn't really thinking about, it's looking at kind of French academic painting, not at modernism or pre-Renaissance painting or kind of these wider areas of art history. And since then, I've just gotten much more interested in looking at those earlier paintings and later paintings as well, and wanting to incorporate more of that into my work. So I think that's made things change quite a bit. And then when I was in graduate school, I started kind of painting in a different way, like thinking a little bit more about the time spent making the paintings, like letting paintings change over time, working from motifs that were in flux rather than static. So I had to kind of capture things, as they shifted every day, like painting on a kind of in a communal kitchen, painting the countertop. And so all of the objects were getting moved around every day. So I couldn't paint in such a static and pre-planned approach. And that aspect of making changes and having things shift and being much more kind of open to the painting evolving and kind of revealing itself to me over time has carried all the way through and has been really important to how I make these paintings, I guess.
What do you think your artwork say about you and your personality?
I don't know. I certainly, I guess I don't like having, like, if something is really completely pre-planned and I'm working with a little tiny brush on a little painting where I've planned everything out, like I have made paintings in that way, and I felt much less engaged. So I've been trying to find a way of working where I feel like as engaged as possible through the whole process. And I think that these paintings where I'm kind of discovering the painting as I'm working, and juggling the whole composition and the color and value and drawing and all of these decisions at the same time have made me feel more engaged. And I hope that then kind of comes through in the work. Although it also feels a little scary. It's hard to kind of like, I don't know how this painting is going to end up. And I've spent hundreds of hours on it, and I feel like it's going to take hundreds of hours more, which just feels, totally crazy to put that much in and not know how it's going to be. So I'm not sure what that reveals about my personality.
Well, I think it tells us that you're very patient since you've been working on this for 2 years.
Yeah. I really enjoy being in the middle of these paintings. I do. Yeah. And it feels like there's a lot of engagement as I'm like in that kind of middle stage of just like trying to get parts to work with other parts, and just like looking at these kind of relationships between things, like balancing out the shapes and the colors and pushing and pulling the space of the painting, and all of those things just feel like it's a game, and it's really hard. So it's both like really exciting and frustrating, and it's kind of there's endless struggle and things to explore with that, I guess.
You feel it's a struggle, do you? Because we often hear that word associated with artwork, that it's a struggle and that it doesn't have true meaning if it doesn't involve a struggle. Do you believe that?
I don't know about it. I guess it does feel meaningful to just be engaged with it and not to be, I don't know, like to try and do anything really well is hard, I think. And I don't know if the meaning comes from that, though. I don't feel like struggling should have to be meaning, like that has to be where meaning comes from. But I certainly am often interested in paintings that are made over time, that show changes that have been made to the compositions, that show that are complicated. And I think that there's this sense of kind of revelation sometimes with these paintings where I feel like I'm like working away on them and making progress and it's going well. And then I get stuck at a certain point. And then hopefully there's a breakthrough where I kind of will set the painting aside for a few months and get some new idea of how to approach it. And that sense of like this revelation of like, oh my gosh, here's what I can do. Here's how I can fix it kind of re-energizes me and feels really exciting. And I think if there isn't maybe that moment of despair and feeling like the painting isn't good enough and I'm not sure how to proceed, I don't know, maybe it doesn't let me have that breakthrough. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. And it's an emotional journey as well, isn't it? I mean, you come to the studio differently every day. I mean, every day we start the day differently, don't we, in our head and in our emotions. So I guess that changes a little bit. But it seems that once you get in your studio, you're painting for extended periods of time, are you?
Yeah. I work away all day, basically. So, yeah. And it certainly, I do have different ideas about the paintings on different days, but so I'll often kind of correct what I painted the day before. I'll kind of come in and see it fresh and think, oh, okay, actually, that part needs to be a little bit darker, or, oh, this part, needs to go a little bit more towards blue or whatever it is. For sure. Yeah.
Let's rewind and go back to where it all began for you, because you've come full circle. Born and raised in Boulder, Colorado, and here you are still in Boulder, Colorado. You've made this your permanent home, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm actually in Fort Collins, which is an hour north, but it's still pretty close to home. So I was away for about a decade, going to school and living in a few different states. And I think that was really helpful in my 20s. I felt like it was this kind of, I don't know, time of gathering, and getting all these new resources and exploring. And then I think my 30s have felt more like kind of putting down roots and settling in. And I mean, the real thing that kept me here is I came back to Colorado for a bit. I wasn't planning to stay here permanently necessarily, but I met my now husband, and he teaches at CSU, Colorado State University here in Fort Collins. And tenure track positions are few and far between, so we are settled in. And this is starting to feel very much like home. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you know the area, and I want to go back to those very early days of when you were a child growing up in Colorado. What were your earliest memories?
I was an only child and had a pretty happy childhood. It was, my parents are great and are now very excited to be grandparents. And I think some of the happiest memories were like going on camping trips in Colorado. My parents they'd be a little stressed when they were in their regular working lives, and going up to the mountains was really wonderful. We would often go to hot springs and do little road trips around this beautiful area. And I really loved being in the mountains and being outdoors and being with my parents when they were in their more relaxed vacation-y mode.
You mentioned that from their occupations, your mother, Ina Robbins, was a psychotherapist, and your father, Douglas Frank, was an acupuncturist. So pretty intense health-related professions. How much of that rubbed off on you as a child? Did you have any interest towards the medical profession when you were a child?
Oh, definitely not. It seemed, I wanted to be a painter since I was 13. And yeah, I guess my mom's job in particular seemed stressful and difficult to hear, to be dealing with people's emotional problems and stories and trauma all day long. She just retired a couple months ago, and she was talking a little bit more about how meaningful that 50-year-long career was, and how many, like over 1,000 people's lives who she changed and helped, and even thinking about how she did a lot of trauma work, and that how, helping those people's trauma could help have their children have healthier, happier lives. And so just feeling like she's really made an impact in the world in a really meaningful way, and had these really meaningful relationships with some clients for decades and all of that. So it was nice to kind of see her wrapping up her career and seeing the kind of more positive reflections on how that had all been, I guess.
How was your relationship with your parents? Who were you closest to, and what kind of things did you do with them, each of them?
I had a positive relationship with them. It was always easier with my dad. And my mom and I have often had little more dynamics, as we would say. We still do, but we get along well. And my mom and I would do a lot of craft and art projects together. It was really fun. She likes to sew and knit and do little, like painting figurines, and has taken some art classes and things, which was lovely. And my dad would play, basketball with me out in the driveway, and was very playful and kind of fun and easy to be around, which was really lovely. Very patient and engaged.
And as a young schoolgirl then, what were your interests? Were you drawn to art in school when you were small?
I was. I went to a Waldorf school, which is very arts focused. And I just loved that educational experience. I loved being in that environment, which was very imaginative, and getting to paint and do woodwork and craft projects and all of that, as well as academics in school. And kind of just living in a more imaginative world for a longer time. Some of the education has, like gnomes and fairies and things in those lower grades that are kind of helping you learn math, and it's just very kind of whimsical. And I was an only child and spent a lot of time kind of making things in the basement. That was how I played. I didn't really play with dolls or anything. I would be drawing and doing little clay sculptures and making little books and things, and basically doing what I'm doing now. So it's pretty great that I get to play the way that I always have.
So at what point then did you realize this was going to be your pathway in life?
When I was 13, I guess in 7th grade, we had a course on Renaissance painting, and that felt like, I don't know, just, oh my gosh, look at these incredible paintings. These big multiple figure compositions from painters like Raphael and Michelangelo and Da Vinci and all of that, and just getting so excited and feeling like that would like, okay, that's what I want to do. And I had no idea what that really would mean, or how to get there, or any of that. But I ended up, I did a lot of art classes in high school, and I actually ended up going to 2 different high schools. I was kind of dual enrolled so that I could take extra art classes at this other public high school that had a better art program. And then, it was kind of planning to do that all the way through. I was originally planning to major in painting at a kind of small liberal arts college, and then felt like I wasn't able to do as much art as I wanted to actually there. So I dropped out after a year and a half, and kind of stumbled into that atelier program with Juliet Aristides. And it was just felt like this magical place where I was able to basically be as close to being in like Raphael's workshop in the Renaissance as I possibly could in this era. And that was just like exactly what I wanted to be doing. I was able to draw and paint all day long and focus on learning those kind of traditional painting skills, which were the thing that made me, kind of as a younger child, really want to kind of move towards painting.
So a very studious child then.
Yeah, that's true. I was a good student. I was not rebellious.
What else did you enjoy in school? Were you into sport?
I was. I was very into volleyball and basketball, and played softball as well up until 8th grade. And then I went to a small performing arts-based Waldorf high school, and so there was no sports there, and I stopped. So I was like really into it. Before I wanted to be an artist, I wanted to be a professional basketball player. From maybe like 3rd to 5th grade or something. So. I definitely liked that. And I liked all of the kind of history and story. I liked hearing stories, I guess. I liked the, English class and history classes and things like that, I guess. More those humanities type courses.
Are you a big reader?
Not as much anymore. I was at the time, and I feel like my attention span has been a little bit ruined by our digital world. So I don't read nearly as much as I used to.
Now, you've told me that you don't listen to music either in your studio, or generally not much. So what is it that stimulates you? Is it the spoken word? Is it podcasts? What kind of things stimulate you, or do you have to have complete silence when you're working?
I listen to podcasts a lot. So I think having that kind of busy part of my brain just sort of occupied with podcasts is kind of delightful as I'm and kind of maybe takes that part of my brain away a little bit so that I can just be making observations and be working a little bit more intuitively on the paintings, I guess. So I listen to just hundreds and hundreds of hours of podcasts.
Well, that's
basically.
good to hear.
Occasionally audiobooks, but it's actually kind of hard for me to track. I think I'm only kind of, my husband jokes that I'll like come home and I'll launch into a story of something that I heard in a podcast that I found so interesting, but I'll actually have only really listened to like 25% of it. And so I'll like launch into this story and then I'll have no, like, there'll be no point. Like I'll have missed the like essential thing. So listening to an audiobook has been harder because I think it's harder to kind of track a whole book because I'm kind of, it's just sort of playing in the background, I guess. Yeah.
So when you were in college, were you into music?
No, I was never particularly into music. I played violin growing up, which was a struggle. And, I guess music has always been kind of in the background, but I haven't I don't know, been as passionate about that, I suppose.
What was college life like for you?
Well, I was only there for a year and a half, and the first year was really lovely. It was a really sweet small college. And the second year I got really depressed and felt like I kind of wasn't in the right place where I needed to be and wasn't quite sure what the depression was about. And I think it was that I wasn't quite in the place. I wasn't in the right spot for doing what I wanted to do. And I didn't quite know how to. It felt too scary to imagine just dropping out of college. And I wasn't quite sure how to find the right direction towards painting, I guess. So I left and went and lived with my godmother in Seattle for that year afterwards and started taking art classes at Gage full time. And that was a really great transition to find my way into doing the full-time painting, which I wanted to do. And I think it felt too scary to just say, to be able to say, I just, I just want to drop out of college and paint full time. Like that felt impossible to do. And somehow being in this deep depression made it clear that I couldn't continue in college and needed to do something else, and was kind of an unfortunate means to get where I needed to go, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Do you know what was behind it, the depression and that phase of your life?
I think it was just feeling like I was off track and not able to. I wasn't doing what I really wanted to be doing.
And who was inspiring you in terms of the artwork you were looking at, the artist works that you were studying? Who would you have said that inspired you when you were younger?
It was those kind of Renaissance painters originally. And then when I was in the atelier, we were also looking at kind of Baroque painters, like looking at Titian and Caravaggio and Velázquez, and just kind of that it was that kind of that era of art history that I was looking at mainly, Rembrandt and all of those, Vermeer. And then it's since then that my interests have kind of expanded a lot more. Yeah.
Did you travel much overseas to study art or to visit museums in Europe?
I did. Yeah. Once I graduated from school, I felt like I'd been kind of making these, like pilgrimages to all the great museums in Europe and really spreading it out. So I spent, 5 months in Paris and did a master copy at the Louvre for a couple months. I was going to the Louvre 2 or 3 days a week while I was there, and then painting, and I've spent probably 3 different trips to Italy where I've spent about a month each, and gone to Germany for a month. And so I'm just going very, very slowly. 3 weeks in Spain, going to Madrid and the Prado, a couple weeks in London, going to the National Gallery and all of that. And that's been just hugely important, to spend time looking at paintings in the original. And, I'm just, it's like great paintings that make me want to paint. And that are kind of the foundation for how I'm thinking about approaching my own paintings.
So you really bring home a piece of all of that in your mind then, from the very different cultures, from Germany, from Spain, in France, all very different artwork you're looking at. But that has been the inspiration, has it, to much of what you do now?
Yeah. I think like looking at paintings feels just absolutely essential to making paintings. And sometimes when I'm looking through a museum, it's like each time I go, even if I'm going to the same museum several years apart, I'm thinking about new things. Like there's different problems that I'm trying to solve in my own work. And so, one time it's like I'm obsessed about how they're painting flesh and like what are the colors that are being used in flesh and how dark are they, how dark are people painting the shadows versus the lights. And then another time I'm thinking about the kind of all over composition of the paintings. Like how is the overall kind of dark and light structure of this painting working? How are figures grouped together? So there's just so many, kind of different layers of information. And as I'm thinking about different things in my own work, I think I'm seeing different things in the paintings that I'm looking at, and am inspired by different things, to kind of bring back to solve the problems that I'm having in the studio.
Were you ever tempted to relocate to Europe?
Yeah, I did. I have fantasized about that. But that's, I don't think that's in the cards for me, and getting to go on these extended trips has been a real privilege. So I think that's the way we're going to go.
Let's go back to when you graduated, when you left art school. What was on your mind of what you felt you needed to do to continue to pursue your career in art?
I felt like when I left the MFA program, it just felt like very focused on, I got a studio right away and just continued working. Like I had painting projects that were, I guess I was kind of saying before, like one painting was leading to the next, and there was sort of like things I wanted to try out in painting. And it felt important to just kind of to go straight into working on those next projects and just kind of continuing with that work that I was doing, I guess. And I was very rigid about the kind of clocking in and clocking out every day. I was actually the first year out of school. I had a little spreadsheet where I was keeping track of my hours and just being very diligent about making sure I was getting the painting time in, and not letting, really treating it like a job.
What was Zoey Frank doing when she wasn't painting then? How did you make a living right out of school?
I started making enough money to support myself on paintings while I was in school. So in my first year of the MFA program, I started selling enough paintings. Before that, when I was in Seattle studying at Gage Academy, I was working as a figure model for art classes, which was awesome to be able to sit in on. So I was drawing and painting all day. And then in the evenings and weekends, I was sitting in on art classes and getting to go to private studios all around the city and kind of seeing all the other figurative painters working from the figure. And hearing kind of different approaches to how people were approaching the figure. And that was actually really kind of additionally informative as I was, holding very still for many hours. So I did that for a few years. Yeah.
So there was never any doubt that this was a career that you could go straight into and make a living out of? Did you have any confidence in yourself and your ability then when you graduated?
No, I had a lot of, when I graduated from the MFA program, I was feeling much more confident because I was making enough money at that point, and I had a solo show lined up the year after I graduated, and I was working towards that. So that felt, at that point, I was feeling much more confident. When I graduated from the Atelier program, I guess, before that, I was very anxious, and I had, kind of a second round. I've had these, I had that, kind of year-long depression when I was 19. And then when I was, maybe 24, finishing that program, I had to kind of, again, like a year-long kind of health crisis where I just, was so anxious that I didn't know how I was going to be able to really make a living as a painter, and how this was going to work. And wanted so much for it to happen. And so at that point, I ended up actually moving, in part because I was having these health problems. I ended up moving back home with my parents for a year, and they were generously providing free rent for me. And then I was just renting a studio space because at the time I was like, I couldn't figure out how I would be able to pay both studio rent and housing rent. So it was really helpful to have that support from them, where they provided, I was able to move back into my childhood bedroom for a year. And I was also still working then as a figure model around town in Colorado. And then I also worked as a studio assistant for a ceramic sculptor named Caroline Douglas, who does really wonderful work. So I worked for her for about 6 years, kind of while I was going through Gage. I would work for her on the summers, come back to Colorado every summer and save up some money. And I worked for her that year after as well, a little bit. So those were kind of my transition jobs before I started supporting myself on the paintings.
But always in the art world, always as an artist. I'm wondering if art chose you or you chose art. I often ask that question because I think if you're a career artist, there's some inevitability about it, since you've done nothing else but art.
Yeah, I feel so grateful to have found this. It's just absolutely amazing to be able to do this every day and to have a career that I love so much, and to be able to be so engaged with these paintings and make the paintings that I want to make and support myself that way is like something that did not feel possible or inevitable, or it felt really in doubt at one point, and really scary to head in this direction. So it's pretty amazing to be able to do this.
Which is the most fun part of all of this, though, Zoey? Is it the actual painting, or is it the thrill of having exhibitions, having shows, which you've had extensively throughout your career? Which do you get the biggest kick out of? Oh my God, by 100% the painting. The exhibitions I'm doing the shows so that I can make more paintings. But isn't that the validation for your work?
The selling the work does feel validating. It feels like there is that kind of boy, we live in a capitalist society, and it feels nice to have things actually sell and to feel like what I'm doing is valid, and that I'm, it makes sense for me to have hired an au pair and gone back to work because I'm making more money, painting than, but the shows themselves feel like the first shows I had, I would have this really low afterwards. Like it would just feel like you work for 2 years on a body of work and pour yourself into these paintings. And then there's like a 2-hour long event, where, you talk to a bunch of people and there's all this enthusiasm, or not actually that many people show up and not that much sells. It's like, it can really vary. And either way, I would just kind of crash afterwards. Like it would just feel like such a letdown. And I think in the last few shows, I felt much more balanced going in, because it feels like it's about I'm just really focused on making the paintings and getting to make these paintings, and the kind of reception, for those 2 hours feels like, I don't know, I can kind of gear up for it and get through it. And it is lovely to see people and have the work appreciated. And then I'm very eager to just get back to it and have the space cleared out of the studio so that I can make new paintings.
That kind of answers my next question, whether you enjoy the recognition, the fame, really, of being an artist and being shown so extensively and going into these exhibitions, you know, that admiration. Is that something that you enjoy, or you endure it for the time because you just can't wait to get back to the studio? And
I mean, it's so funny because like fame in the art world is like, it's not real fame. Like there's, you know, nobody knows who I am. It's, you know, there's some other painters who do. But it's nothing like being, you know, a musician or an actor or, you know, an actual famous person. So I think it's just the right amount of like, it is really nice to have. I think what feels meaningful is when other painters whose work I really respect and look up to, and to get to feel like a colleague with those people and to have people appreciate what I'm doing. That feels really meaningful, to kind of be in dialogue with other painters. That feels really special. And it feels, and it's also like, it's wonderful to like, I have been inspired by other contemporary painters, and then to, you know, hear, you know, college students reaching out who are excited about what I'm doing, you know, that feels really meaningful too. Yeah, I like that. But it really does feel like something I kind of am getting through. I'm like getting through the opening to then be able to go back and just kind of get to work again. I'm not an extrovert.
So where do you fall in between introvert, extrovert, ambivert, omnivert? Where do you fall?
I guess I'm a mix. I am an introvert, and I love being in the studio by myself, and just getting to, you know, work here. But it does become a little bit isolating sometimes. And I do want to, you know, visit with people on the weekends and, you know, chat with people in the evenings and things. I need some socializing after being in the studio all day. I feel like I think I missed the socializing more right after school. It was hard to go from being in those school environments where I was getting feedback on the work really regularly and chatting with other students and all of that all the time, to then just working on my own. That felt like a really challenging transition. And I think now I've just sort of settled into it. Like, oh, here I am. I'm doing my thing. You know.
And it's all studio based.
Yeah, I'm working in the studio. Sometimes I do work on projects from observation at home sometimes, or if we're traveling, I'll work from observation also. And I've taught some courses. I was doing some traveling workshops and things. And then in the pandemic started teaching some bigger Zoom workshops. So there's some kind of, I don't know, engagement with people and with ideas and stuff in those ways as well, which is kind of has been a good balance.
Yeah, I was going to come to that and do your online courses. Do you enjoy being a teacher?
It's not a natural mode for me. I think it really feels like a big push to kind of be leading a big group of people and giving lectures. I'm not an art historian or an academic. It's been really fun to have, my husband is an academic, and has helped kind of form those lectures with me. And we've kind of talked through the ideas and read things together and kind of worked on those courses together, which has been a really fun project and fun to be engaged that way together. And then also kind of talk back and forth during those courses a little bit. So it's not just me lecturing for an hour. So that's been great. And I do find reading and learning more about painting really helpful. Like having that kind of engagement with ideas about painting has informed my work. So doing those courses kind of helps me, it makes me do some extra reading and thinking through things, and also kind of looking at paintings more deeply and formulating my ideas about what's important to me, and being able to kind of think through what I'm doing a little bit more. I think that has all actually been helpful, although it's not it's not easy for me. It feels like, I kind of have to gear up to do it. I always would rather just be painting.
Now, when you're painting, which is your preferred medium, Zoey?
I use oils almost exclusively. I do some studies in gouache and drawings as well, I guess. But yeah, I'm mainly an oil painter.
And clearly you love the exploration, the journey of all of this and learning new ways and discovering as you go, the adventure of it all, the journey. Do you have anything that you feel you're aiming towards?
That feels really unclear. I feel like I am I'm trying to get deeper. I'm trying to get work that feels better and stronger and more meaningful and more sincere, like more kind of sincere or that has more kind of gravitas to it or something. But what that looks like is really unclear to me. And I am looking at other paintings a lot and trying to explore, like trying out different things in the paintings to try and get towards something that kind of like resonates with me more. And I feel inspired by painters like, I don't know, like Cezanne or something. There was a book about old masters and young geniuses. That there's some painters like Picasso is kind of one of the young geniuses where he had these big kind of breakthroughs, and his best work was done when he was young. And they were these kind of intellectual leaps that he made that then kind of came out in the work, versus these old masters like Cezanne, where he kind of worked away, and his best work was actually in his maybe 60s, and was just kind of, it's like through the process of painting, he was arriving somewhere, and it was more of a found, the paintings were more kind of moving from one to the next on that sense of exploration. And then eventually, kind of through that process, getting better and better. And like all, those paintings are just really, really fabulous. And I hope that I'm hoping to be on some kind of path like that, where it's not clear exactly where the work is going, but I'm trying to keep moving forward.
What would you say art has done for you?
I think that, looking at great paintings, looking at painting, it feels like it's giving meaning to life. Like it feels profound in a very kind of, and I'm like, it sounds very corny or something, but seeing like the best of what humanity can do, like seeing, I don't know, our impulse to find order and relationships and to make marks, and it feels like this kind of, I don't know, like the world can feel very very chaotic and very dark sometimes, and looking at paintings feels like a reminder of like why this all, like what is good in us as humans in a really profound way.
What would you consider to be significant milestones then in your life?
I think certainly the things that I mentioned of, kind of finding that painting program at Gage with Juliet felt really pivotal, and doing the MFA program actually really did shape my work and kind of move me forward in a really profound way. It was helpful coming to Colorado. There's another painter here, Jordan Wolfson, who's been a really kind of important mentor for me and helped me kind of think through painting and do some reading about painting, that made a big difference. And certainly, these milestones of like, career moments have been helpful, of like, having my first solo show and having my first show in New York and, selling my first really big painting, and, those kind of things felt meaningful as well. But yeah, I don't know if I have a good a good answer to that in particular. Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you have any galleries that you really aspire to show in.
It's so hard. I mean, it always does feel like there's this, there's these next steps. Like, okay, I've achieved, a certain level of stability and success. And, but I still feel like there's, I'm in a small part of the art world and not in that big part of the art world. I think everybody wants to be showing at those kind of mega galleries. And of course that would be amazing. And I'm not quite sure how you make that leap happen. But that certainly would be amazing. And I'm making these giant paintings and I would love to have, places for them to be shown. A gallery that can hold an 18-foot high by 20-foot wide painting. Not all galleries can do that.
And going back to Ida, your 7-month-old daughter now, will you be the mum that encourages her into art?
Not intentionally. I mean, I just am curious to see who she is and what her interests are. I wouldn't discourage her, but I'm not going to try and train her to be a painter or something. If she wants to be an environmental scientist or something, that would be awesome also. I would hope that whatever she is interested in, that she finds something that she's passionate about and like a real career that she is that she can love and kind of pour herself into. That has felt really meaningful to me and to my partner. So I would hope that for her. But I'm so curious to just see who she is and what her interests are.
What would you say your hidden talents are that you could show her?
Well, I certainly will spend a lot of time doing creative projects with her because that's how I like to play. So we will spend time, making things together. And
playing basketball?
Potentially, yeah. That would be fun. That would be really fun to do. And it's funny because I was saying I'm not, wanting to push her towards being an artist, but last week, she made her first painting, which was just her sitting in the kitchen and she ended up smearing yogurt all over this one cabinet while she was I was cooking and she was eating yogurt and she was just so engaged with it. She was making these marks on the cabinet with her fingers and covering it in this yogurt. And I was just oh, I'm so proud. Look at you. This impulse to make a mark and see your hand being able to I don't know, your hand to have an impact in the world in this visual way is just so, it just feels so fundamental. Somehow it was just so funny to, see my little 6.5-month-old baby, making marks for the first time. So I'm not planning to turn her into an artist, but there I was being all excited by her yogurt on the cabinet project. So who knows?
She will have the encouragement.
Yeah, I guess so. Because I was oh, look at that. That's amazing. Oh, man. Yeah. And then I moved the high chair out of the way so that she could no longer reach the cabinet and
Imagine how that's going to evolve when she gets into the studio and she's starting running around the studio.
Yeah. It's going to be many different phases. As she grows up.
Zoey, obviously the journey that you have right now is reaching so many career highlights along the way, and I'm sure so much to come, and maybe even bigger pieces of art as well. So the very best of luck to you on your continued art journey.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
And thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for your questions. I somehow got a lot more personal in this interview than I think I have in other ones. Maybe, maybe it was you, or maybe it was having this new baby in my life. Who knows?
And if you scroll down the show notes accompanying this episode, you will find a link to Zoe's website where you can find a selection of her work and also a link to her Instagram account. And you can also find a link to our Instagram profile too. So we hope you'll give us a follow there and share this podcast with anyone that you think would enjoy the show too. I'll be back next week with another guest from the world of visual arts. So I do hope you'll join me then.